The moment her father traded her to a monster to clear a debt, Alessia Moretti braced for the worst. In the sterile quiet of her father's high-rise office, watching Luciano Moretti sign the papers that erased her future, she anticipated a life of brutality. She was prepared for pain, but what she wasn't prepared for was the gaze of Dante Falcone. He didn't look at her like a piece of property, but like a prize he had been hunting his entire life. For a woman who was raised to be invisible, being seen was the most dangerous thing of all. The crystal tumbler hit the marble floor with a crack that made Alessia flinch. She'd been standing in the corner of her father's study for 20 minutes, silent and still as furniture, exactly as he preferred. Luciano Moretti didn't acknowledge the sound. He never acknowledged her unless he needed something to break. "You're late." Her father's voice carried the kind of cold precision that had built empires and destroyed competitors. He wasn't speaking to her. Alessia kept her eyes down, studying the intricate Persian rug beneath her feet. She'd memorized every thread over the years, every subtle shift in color. It was easier than looking at her father. Safer. The penthouse stretched around them, all glass and steel and money, suspended 40 stories above the city, like a throne in the sky. Everything in it was beautiful, expensive, perfect. Everything except her. Traffic. The voice that answered was darker than her father's, rougher around the edges, with something dangerous lurking beneath the surface. "Calm. Your city's a fucking nightmare at this hour." Alessia's breath caught. She'd heard stories about Dante Falcone, whispers that circulated among her father's staff when they thought she wasn't listening. The crime lord who controlled half the eastern seaboard, the man who'd built an empire on fear and violence and left bodies in his wake without losing sleep. People crossed streets to avoid his shadow. "Then you should have left earlier." Luciano moved to the bar cart, pouring scotch, with the precise measurements of a man who controlled everything down to the milliliter. "We had an agreement. 8 o'clock. We had a negotiation. There's a difference." Alessia risked a glance up. The man standing across from her father was younger than she'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it, and a jaw that could cut glass. He wore all black from the expensive coat that hung open to the boots that probably cost more than most people's rent. But it was his eyes that made her stomach flip. Cold, calculating, missing nothing. Those eyes found her in the corner, and everything inside Alessia went very still. She looked away immediately, heart hammering. In her father's world, being noticed was dangerous. Being invisible kept you alive. The girl's part of the agreement. Luciano said it casually, like he was discussing a piece of furniture. Full settlement of the debt, as discussed. Alessia's knees went weak. She'd known something was coming. Her father had been too quiet lately, too watchful, like a snake coiling before the strike. But this, let me see her properly. Dante's voice had changed, gone flat in a way that made the air in the room feel thinner. "Alessia, come here." She moved on instinct, years of obedience overriding the scream building in her chest. Her legs felt disconnected from her body as she crossed the study, each step an eternity. When she reached her father's side, she stopped, hands clasped in front of her, eyes fixed on the floor. "Look up." The command came from Dante, not her father, and it startled her enough that she obeyed before she could think better of it. He was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, like he was cataloging every detail, every flaw, every reason to find her lacking. She waited for the disgust to cross his face. It always did. Her father had made sure she knew exactly what she was worth, which was nothing. But Dante's expression didn't shift to contempt. His jaw tightened, something flickering behind his eyes that looked almost like anger, but not directed at her. "How old is she?" His voice had gone dangerous, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. 22, legal in every sense that matters. Luciano sipped his scotch, utterly unbothered. "She's healthy, compliant, and she knows how to keep her mouth shut. More than adequate to settle our business." Alessia felt the words like physical blows. Adequate, as if she were livestock being appraised. Compliant. Dante repeated the word like it tasted wrong. "You beat that into her, or was she born convenient?" "Does it matter?" Her father's smile was the one he used in boardrooms before crushing someone. "You're getting what you paid for." "I paid for the shipment routes and the waterfront access." Dante gestured toward Alessia, and she fought the urge to disappear into herself. "This wasn't part of any negotiation I agreed to. Consider it a bonus. Luciano moved closer to Alessia and she automatically took a step back before catching herself. The punishment for showing fear was worse than standing still. She's been nothing but a drain on my resources since her mother died. No talent for business, no useful connections, no ambition. At least this way, she serves a purpose. Alessia's throat burned, but she kept her face blank. She'd learned years ago that crying only made him angrier. A purpose? Dante's laugh was harsh, humorless. You're a real piece of work, Moretti. I'm a businessman. Her father drained his glass and set it down with a decisive click. Everything's a transaction. You wanted territory. I needed to settle some debts. She's the collateral that makes everyone whole. Clean, simple, done. Nothing about this is clean. Then refuse. Luciano's voice hardened. Walk away, but the roots go with her. Package deal. You want access to my distribution network? You take the girl. Otherwise, I'll find someone else who's interested in both. The silence that followed was suffocating. Alessia could feel Dante's gaze on her, could sense him weighing options, calculating angles. Men like him didn't make decisions based on sentiment. They made them based on power, profit, strategy. And she was just another asset on a balance sheet, a complication in someone else's empire building. She was going to be sick. Fine. Dante bit out the word. But we're clear on terms. Full access to the eastern routes, no interference, no hidden fees, and if I find out you fucked me over. You'll do what? Her father smiled. Kill me, please. You need me, Falcone. My network, my connections, my infrastructure. That's why you came here in the first place. Keep telling yourself that. Luciano pulled a folder from his desk drawer, sliding it across the polished surface. Contracts. Sign them, and she's yours, along with everything else we discussed. Alessia watched, numb, as Dante flipped through the pages. His jaw worked as he read, tension coiling in his shoulders, but he didn't refuse, didn't walk away. Just pulled a pen from inside his coat and signed his name in 3 places with sharp, angry strokes. There, he threw the pen down. Done. Happy? Ecstatic. Her father collected the contracts, tucking them away like they were precious, like they weren't the documents that had just sold his daughter to a stranger. She'll need 10 minutes to pack. No. Dante's voice cracked like a whip. She comes now. Whatever she needs, I'll provide. Suit yourself. Luciano finally looked at Alessia, his pale eyes flat and cold. You're dismissed permanently. Don't embarrass me by showing up here again. The words should have hurt more than they did. But Alessia had been preparing for this moment her entire life in one form or another. Her father had never wanted her. He'd made that abundantly clear from the day her mother died, and left him stuck with a daughter he considered worthless. She should say something. Thank you, maybe, or goodbye, or fuck you to hell. But her voice was trapped somewhere behind her ribs, and her legs were already moving toward the door because standing still meant prolonging this, and she couldn't wait. She froze at Dante's command, every muscle locking. He crossed the space between them in 3 long strides, and she forced herself not to retreat. Men didn't like it when you showed fear. It made them meaner. But Dante didn't grab her, didn't haul her toward the door like property. Instead, he shrugged out of his coat and draped it over her shoulders. The weight of it was startling, the fabric still warm from his body. It's cold outside. His voice had gentled slightly, though his expression remained hard. You'll need this. Alessia stared at him, completely disarmed. No one had cared if she was cold since her mother died. No one had cared about anything except staying out of her father's way. Thank you, she whispered, the words scraping out of her throat. Something shifted in Dante's eyes, gone too quickly for her to identify. Then he turned back to her father, and the dangerous edge returned. We're done here. Indeed. Luciano had already dismissed them both, returning to his desk and the paperwork that mattered more than his daughter ever had. Close the door on your way out. Dante's hand settled on the small of Alessia's back, not possessive, not demanding, just guiding. She moved with him, barely breathing, as they left the study and walked through the penthouse that had been her prison for 22 years. The elevator ride down was silent. Dante stood against the far wall, arms crossed, watching the numbers descend. Alessia clutched his coat around herself, trying to process what had just happened. Her father had sold her to a crime lord, to a man who built empires on violence and fear, and she was supposed to just what? Accept it. Adjust. The lobby was empty except for a doorman who very deliberately looked away as they passed. Outside, a black SUV waited at the curb, engine running. The back door opened as they approached, and a driver in matching black nodded at Dante. "Boss." "Blackwood Manor," Dante said shortly. "Take the long route. I need to think." He handed Alessia into the vehicle with surprising care, then climbed in beside her. The door shut with a heavy final sound. The locks engaged, and just like that, she was trapped in a car with a man who now owned her, heading toward an unknown future in a place she'd never seen. Alessia pressed herself against the far door, trying to take up as little space as possible. The coat was too big on her, drowning her frame, but she didn't dare take it off. It felt like armor, however thin. The city slid past the tinted windows, lights and steel, and thousands of people living their lives, unaware that hers had just been signed away on a contract. She wondered if any of them had ever felt this kind of numb terror, this complete absence of control. "You scared of me?" Dante's question cut through the silence. Alessia's hands twisted in her lap. Lying seemed stupid. "Yes." "Good." He looked out his own window, jaw tight. "You should be. I'm not a good man. And I don't pretend to be, but I'm not your father either." She didn't know what to say to that, so she stayed quiet. "I didn't know he was throwing you into the deal," Dante continued, his voice harder now. "That wasn't part of the negotiation. He sprung that shit at the last second, knowing I couldn't walk away from the routes without starting a war I'm not ready for." "I understand." And she did. She was leverage, a complication, something to be tolerated because refusing meant losing something more valuable. "Do you?" He turned to look at her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath hitch. "Because I'm not sure you do. Your father's a manipulative bastard who just used you as a bargaining chip. That's not on you. That's on him." Alessia swallowed hard. "It doesn't change anything. Maybe not. But I want you to understand something." Dante leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. I'm taking you to Blackwood Manor, my estate. It's remote, it's secure, and no one gets in or out without my permission. You'll have your own space, your own room, and there are rules." Of course, there were. Men like him always had rules. Rule 1, you don't leave the grounds without me or my head of security. It's not safe, and I'm not risking my assets. His eyes narrowed. Rule 2, you don't contact your father or anyone from your old life. Clean break. Rule 3, what happens in my house stays in my house. You see things, you keep your mouth shut. Alessia nodded mechanically. She'd been keeping her mouth shut her entire life. And Rule 4. Dante's voice dropped even lower, something almost protective creeping into it. No one touches you without your permission. Not my men, not business associates, not me. That's non-negotiable. She blinked, confusion cutting through the fear. "But you," my father said. "I don't give a fuck what your father said." The words were sharp enough to draw blood. "You're not property. You're not a transaction. You're a person who got dealt a shit hand, and I'm not making it worse." Alessia stared at him, trying to find the lie, the trick, the hidden cost. But Dante's expression was granite hard and absolutely serious. "I don't understand," she admitted quietly. "You will," he sat back, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Just try not to break anything expensive while you figure it out." The SUV turned off the highway onto a private road that wound through dense forest. Tall gates appeared ahead, iron and imposing security cameras tracking their approach. They opened smoothly, closing again once the vehicle passed through. Blackwood Manor revealed itself gradually, a sprawling estate that looked more like a fortress than a home. All stone and dark wood and sharp angles. Lights blazed from windows, and Alessia could see figures moving inside. Shadows of people who lived and worked in Dante's world, her new world. The car stopped in a circular drive. Dante was out before she could process it, opening her door and offering his hand. She took it automatically, let him help her out into the cold night air. A woman appeared in the doorway, mid-40s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Boss?" Her voice was crisp, efficient. "Didn't expect you back tonight." Plans changed, Sophia. Dante kept his hand on Alessia's back. That same gentle guidance. "This is Alessia Moretti. She'll be staying here. Set up the East Wing guest suite. Make sure it's stocked with everything she needs." Sophia's sharp eyes assessed Alessia in 3 seconds flat, and something like understanding crossed her face. "Of course, Miss Moretti, if you'll follow me." "Go ahead," Dante said, finally dropping his hand. "Sophia runs the house. Whatever you need, ask her. I've got calls to make." He disappeared into a side hallway before Alessia could respond, leaving her standing with a stranger in a house full of danger and questions and rules she didn't yet understand. Sophia's expression softened fractionally. "Come on, honey, let's get you settled. You look like you're about to fall over." Alessia followed her through corridors that seemed to go on forever, past rooms she couldn't identify, and security checkpoints that made her skin crawl. Everything about Blackwood Manor screamed power and control and money. Not the sterile cold wealth of her father's penthouse, but something darker, more lived in, more real. The East Wing was quieter, away from the main areas. Sophia opened a door to reveal a suite that was larger than Alessia's entire childhood bedroom. Comfortable furniture, soft lighting, windows that overlooked dark forest stretching into nothing. "Bathrooms through there," Sophia pointed. "Clothes in the closet should fit well enough until we can get you properly outfitted. Kitchen's downstairs if you get hungry, but I'll have something sent up tonight. You eat?" Alessia nodded, though her stomach was twisted too tight to imagine food. "Good. Try to get some sleep." Sophia paused at the door, her expression knowing. "I've worked for Mr. Falcone for 8 years. He's hard, he's demanding, and he's got a temper, but he's fair. If he gave you rules, he meant them. All of them. Even the last one." Alessia's voice came out smaller than she intended, especially the last one. Sophia's smile was thin but genuine. "Get some rest, Miss Moretti. Tomorrow's going to be overwhelming enough without exhaustion making it worse." The door closed with a soft click, and Alessia was alone. She stood in the center of the room for a long time, Dante's coat still wrapped around her shoulders, trying to make sense of everything. Her father had sold her. A crime lord had bought her, and instead of the nightmare she'd expected, she'd been given rules that included protection. It didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. Eventually, her legs gave out, and she sank onto the edge of the bed. The mattress was soft, expensive, nothing like the hard, narrow cot she'd slept on at her father's place. Everything here was nicer, actually, warmer, almost safe. But safety was an illusion. She'd learned that lesson young. Alessia pulled the coat tighter and let herself fall back onto the bed, staring at the ceiling. Somewhere in this massive house, Dante Falcone was making calls, running his empire, doing whatever crime lords did at night. And she was here in a room he'd provided, following rules he'd set, belonging to him in ways she didn't yet understand. She should be terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the fear, something else stirred, something that had felt like it died the day her mother passed, and her father's indifference turned to active contempt. Hope, maybe, or just the absence of the constant, grinding certainty that she was worthless. Dante had looked at her, really looked at her, and he'd seen something. Not disgust, not disappointment, just something. And when he'd put his coat around her shoulders, when he'd told her no one would touch her without permission, when he'd said she wasn't property, he'd been the first person in years to treat her like she mattered. Alessia closed her eyes, exhaustion finally crashing over her. Tomorrow, she'd figure out what it meant to live in a crime lord's fortress. Tomorrow, she'd navigate the rules and the danger and the impossible situation her father had thrown her into. Tonight, she just needed to breathe. Outside her windows, the forest around Blackwood Manor stood silent and dark, keeping their secrets. And somewhere in the depths of the estate, Dante Falcone poured himself a drink and tried to forget the way Alessia Moretti had looked at him, like she expected him to destroy her, and couldn't understand why he hadn't. It was going to be a long night for both of them. Alessia woke to sunlight slicing through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting sensation of not knowing where she was. The panic hit first, sharp and immediate, before memory caught up. Blackwood Manor. Dante Falcone, her father's signature on a contract that had remade her entire existence. She sat up slowly, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Dante's coat twisted around her like she'd been clutching it in her sleep. The room looked different in daylight, less imposing, but no less expensive. Everything was clean lines and quality materials, the kind of understated luxury that didn't need to announce itself. A soft knock preceded Sophia's entrance. The older woman carried a tray and didn't seem remotely surprised to find Alessia awake and disoriented. "Coffee?" Sophia announced, setting the tray on a side table. "And toast, because you need to eat something before Mr. Falcone decides to have his morning conversation with you." Alessia's stomach clenched. Conversation about what? How things work here. Rules, expectations, the usual. Sophia poured coffee into a delicate cup that probably costs more than Alessia's entire wardrobe back at her father's place. He's not a morning person, so you've got maybe 20 minutes. I'd use them to shower and change. There are clothes in the closet. I don't. Alessia started, then stopped. Didn't what? Didn't know how to navigate this. Didn't understand what was expected. Both were true, but saying them out loud felt like admitting defeat before she'd even started. Sophia's expression softened. Honey, I've seen 3 women come through here over the years. Business associates' daughters, mostly using Blackwood Manor as a safe house while their fathers sorted out territorial disputes. You want my advice? Alessia nodded mutely. Don't try to disappear, mister. Falcone hates when people treat his house like a prison, and don't assume the worst of him just because of what he does for a living. He's got lines he won't cross. Sophia headed for the door, pausing with her hand on the frame. Also, the water pressure in that shower is incredible. Enjoy it while you can. 23 minutes later, Alessia found herself standing in Dante's study wearing borrowed clothes that actually fit. Dark jeans, a soft sweater, boots that didn't pinch. Her hair was still damp from the shower Sophia had been right about, and she felt almost human again, despite the knot of anxiety sitting heavy in her chest. The study was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest. Dante sat behind a massive desk, phone pressed to his ear, and he looked exactly as dangerous as he had last night. Maybe more so in the morning light. I don't care what he thinks is fair, Dante said into the phone, his voice cold enough to freeze. The shipment comes through on our terms or it doesn't come through at all. He's got 48 hours to decide if he wants to keep breathing. He paused, listening. Yeah, make sure he understands that's not a metaphor. He hung up and finally looked at Alessia. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite softness, but a deliberate setting aside of whatever violence had been simmering there moments before. You sleep eventually? She stayed near the door, uncertain if she was supposed to sit or stand or leave. Sit down. Coffee? Sophia brought me some. Thank you. Alessia perched on the edge of a leather chair that probably cost more than a car. Dante studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes missing nothing. You look less like you're about to break. That's progress. She didn't know what to say to that, so she stayed quiet. I've been thinking about our situation, Dante said, leaning back in his chair. The morning light caught the sharp angles of his face, made him look almost carved from stone. Your father stuck me with a complication I didn't ask for, but walking away wasn't an option. So we're here, and we need to figure out how this works. You made the rules clear last night, Alessia offered carefully. Those were the basics. Don't run. Don't talk. Don't let anyone touch you. But there's more to living here than just following orders. He pulled out a tablet, tapping through screens. You have any education past high school? The question caught her off guard. Some college. 2 years. Art, history, and literature. My father pulled me out when my mother died. Said it was a waste of money. Dante's jaw tightened. Of course he did. You want to finish? Alessia stared at him. What? Finish your degree? Online programs, remote learning, whatever works. You're going to be here indefinitely. Might as well do something productive with your time. He made a note on the tablet. Sophia can help you set it up. What else? Her mind was reeling. I don't understand. Why would you? Because I'm not your father. Dante's voice hardened. And because having you sitting around Blackwood Manor doing nothing is a waste of everyone's time. You're smart enough to hold a conversation, which means you're smart enough to learn something useful. So, we're doing this. What else do you need? Alessia's throat was tight. No one had asked her what she needed since her mother died. I don't know. Figure it out. You've got access to the library, the gym, the grounds within the security perimeter. There's a pool if you swim. Kitchen's open whenever you're hungry. Just tell the staff what you want. And if anyone gives you shit, anyone at all, you come directly to me. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Why are you doing this? Dante was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone rough around the edges. You know what I saw last night when I walked into your father's study? Alessia shook her head. A woman who'd been trained to make herself invisible, who flinched when he moved too fast, who didn't argue when he sold her like fucking livestock. Dante's hands flexed on the desk. That's not happening here. You want to be invisible? Fine. But it's going to be your choice, not because someone beat it into you. The words hit like a physical blow. Alessia felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept locked down for years. I'm not good at this, she admitted quietly. Being seen, mattering. Then learn, Dante stood, moving to the windows. You've got time and resources now. Use them. A phone buzzed on his desk, a different one than he'd been using earlier. He glanced at the screen and his entire demeanor shifted, tension coiling in his shoulders. I need to take this. Sophia will show you around properly today. Stay out of the West Wing. That's my private space and work areas. Everywhere else is fair game. He picked up the phone, and Alessia. She paused halfway to the door. You did fine. Don't overthink it. The next 3 days passed in a blur of overwhelming newness. Sophia proved to be an invaluable guide, walking Alessia through Blackwood Manor's labyrinthine corridors and introducing her to the small army of staff who kept the estate running. There was Rocco, the head of security, a man built like a tank with kind eyes that didn't match his tactical gear. Chef Andre, who ran the kitchen with military precision and got genuinely offended when Alessia said she didn't need much to eat, and at least a dozen others whose names she struggled to remember. The estate itself was staggering. Beyond the house sprawled gardens that had gone wild in beautiful ways, a garage full of vehicles that probably cost more than most houses, and a security hub that looked like something from a spy movie. Guard rotations, camera feeds, perimeter checks, all of it running with clockwork efficiency. Alessia found herself drawn to the library most often. 3 stories of books, comfortable chairs tucked into alcoves, windows that let in soft light. It was the quietest place in Blackwood Manor, and no one bothered her there. She could almost pretend she was normal, just someone reading in a beautiful room, not a woman who'd been sold to pay her father's debts. On the 4th morning, she was curled in her favorite chair with a battered copy of Austen when footsteps interrupted her solitude. Hiding or reading? Alessia looked up to find Dante standing in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking less polished than usual. He'd shed the expensive coat for jeans and a dark Henley that showed the muscles in his forearms. It made him look younger, more human, though no less dangerous. Both, she offered. He moved into the library, his gaze scanning the shelves like he was cataloging inventory. This was my mother's space. She collected first editions like some people collect art. Was? The past tense registered. She died when I was 16. Cancer. Dante pulled a book from a high shelf without looking like he knew exactly where it would be. Left me with my father, who had very specific ideas about what I should become. Alessia recognized the tone, the careful distance people put between themselves and old wounds. Did you become what he wanted? Dante's laugh was harsh. Yeah. And then I became worse. Built an empire he'd never imagined. Crossed lines he was too scared to approach. Died hating me for it, which seemed fair. I'm sorry. Don't be. He was a bastard who taught me that power matters more than principles. Dante set the book back. Your father teach you anything useful? The question was casual, but Alessia heard the weight beneath it. How to be quiet. How to stay out of the way. How to make myself small enough that maybe he'd forget I existed. Useful survival skills in the wrong environment. They kept me alive. Yeah. Dante looked at her directly, and something in his expression made her breath catch. But you're not surviving anymore. You're here. Different rules. Rocco appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. Boss, we've got a situation. Dante's entire demeanor changed in an instant, going from almost relaxed to combat ready. What kind? The kind where your presence is required immediately, West Wing. Stay here, Dante told Alessia, already moving. Don't leave the library until someone comes for you. They were gone before she could ask questions, leaving her alone with racing thoughts and the sudden sharp awareness that she'd been allowed to forget what Dante actually was. Not just a man with a dangerous reputation, but someone who dealt in violence and power, and situations that required armed security. Alessia tried to return to her book, but the words, focus. She could hear raised voices from somewhere deep in the house, muffled by distance and thick walls. Once something that might have been a gunshot or a door slamming, she couldn't tell. An hour crawled past, then 2. When Sophia finally appeared, her expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Falcone requests your presence in his study. The walk through Blackwood Manor felt different now, charged with tension. Staff moved with purpose, speaking in low voices. Rocco and two other security personnel stood outside Dante's study, all of them armed. Inside, Dante stood by the windows, a glass of something dark in his hand. Blood stained his knuckles. "Close the door," he said without turning. Sophia did, leaving Alessia alone with him. "Are you hurt?" The question came out before she could think better of it. "Not my blood." Dante finally looked at her, and his eyes were cold, flat, absolutely lethal. "We had a problem. Someone thought they could move product through my territory without permission." We discussed how wrong that assumption was. Alessia's stomach turned, but she forced herself not to look away. "Is it resolved?" "It is now." He drained the glass, set it down with controlled precision. "This is what I do, Alessia. This is who I am. I break people who cross me. I make examples, and I don't lose sleep over it. I know. Do you?" He crossed to her in 3 strides, and she could smell copper and gunpowder and expensive cologne. "Because you're looking at me like I'm still the guy who gave you his coat. But that's not the whole picture. I never thought it was." Alessia met his gaze, forcing her voice steady. "You run a criminal empire. You told me there would be things I'd see that I'd need to keep quiet about. I'm not stupid enough to think that meant charity work." Something shifted in Dante's expression. Surprise maybe, or reassessment. "You're not scared." "I'm terrified, but not of you specifically." She took a breath. "My father sold me to you. Whatever happens here, whatever you are, it's still better than what he had planned." Dante studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, some of the tension left his shoulders. "You're going to be trouble, aren't you?" "I don't know how to be trouble. You'll learn." He moved past her, heading for a door she hadn't noticed before. "Come on." "Where?" "Somewhere you should see if you're going to live here." The door led to a private elevator Alessia hadn't known existed. Dante keyed in a code, and the car descended, going down farther than should have been possible. When the doors opened, they revealed a space that looked like a command center. Monitors displaying security feeds, maps marked with territories and routes, boards covered in photographs and notes written in shorthand she couldn't decipher. 2 men looked up from computer stations, then immediately returned to their work when Dante waved them off. "This is the real Blackwood Manor," Dante said, gesturing to the displays. "Distribution networks, supplier contacts, enforcement schedules, everything that keeps my empire running." He pulled up a particular screen showing what looked like shipping manifests. "This is what your father wanted access to. My routes, my infrastructure, my reputation. That's why you ended up part of the deal." Alessia stared at the intricate web of operations, feeling overwhelmed. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I don't want you walking around here blind." Dante leaned against a desk, arms crossed. "You're going to hear things, see things. People are going to test you to see if you're a liability. I'd rather you understand what you're part of than get caught unprepared. I don't understand any of this. You don't need to understand it. You just need to know it exists." He pulled up another screen, this one showing financial transfers and amounts that made Alessia's head spin. "I move product, mostly high-end cargo, some less legal substances, information when it's valuable. I own ports, warehouses, politicians, and I remove obstacles. Obstacles like the person you dealt with today." Exactly like that. Dante's voice was matter-of-fact. "This world doesn't have room for mercy. You show weakness, you die. You let someone disrespect you. Everyone thinks they can. So I make it very clear what happens when people forget who they're dealing with." Alessia swallowed hard. "And me? What happens to me in all this? That's what we're figuring out." Dante shut down the displays. "You're not part of operations. You're not leverage against your father. That ship sailed when he signed you over. Right now, you're someone living in my house who I don't want turned into a target. So, I'm a complication. No." His voice went rough. "You're someone who deserves better than what you got, but I'm trying to be realistic about what I can offer." They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the evidence of Dante's empire. Alessia thought about the last few days, the unexpected kindness, the rules that protected her, the strange gentleness from a man who apparently had no problem breaking people who crossed him. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Depends on the question. That 4th rule, the one about no one touching me without permission." Alessia forced herself to look at him. "Did you mean that?" Dante's expression went very still. "Yes. Why? Because I've seen what happens when men take what they want without asking. And I'm a lot of things, but I'm not that." His jaw tightened. Your father treated you like property. I won't. Even though you bought me, I bought access to his distribution network. You were a complication he threw in to make the deal harder to refuse. Dante pushed off the desk. But you're not a thing to be used, Alessia. Not by me. Not by anyone here. The words settled into her chest, warm and unfamiliar. I don't know what to do with that. Then don't do anything. Just exist. Take up space. Figure out what you want. He headed back toward the elevator. And try not to look so shocked every time I'm teasing you. It's unsettling. Back upstairs. Alessia retreated to her room with her head spinning. She'd seen the heart of Dante's operation, understood, at least in broad strokes, what kind of man he was. Violent when necessary, strategic always, and somehow inexplicably determined to give her something that looked almost like freedom within the confines of Blackwood Manor. That night, she couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts, too many contradictions. Around midnight, she gave up and wandered down to the kitchen, hoping for tea and quiet. She found Dante instead, sitting at the island with a laptop and what looked like architectural plans spread across the granite. Can't sleep either. He didn't look up from whatever he was studying. Too much in my head. Alessia moved to the stove, finding a kettle. I'll make tea and get out of your way. Stay if you want. I'm just reviewing expansion plans. He finally glanced up, taking in her borrowed pajamas and bare feet. You settling in, okay? I think so. It's strange being somewhere people don't actively wish I'd disappear. Your father did a number on you. He did what he thought was necessary. I was a reminder of my mother, and he couldn't stand that. Alessia poured hot water over a tea bag, watching it steep. After she died, I became invisible. Easier for both of us. Easier for him, Dante corrected. You deserve better. Maybe. But wanting something doesn't make it true. She wrapped her hands around the mug, letting the heat seep in. What are you expanding? Warehouse operations in the Southern District. More legitimate business to offset the illegal stuff. He turned the laptop so she could see. I'm trying to build something that lasts beyond me. That means diversification. Alessia studied the plans, surprised by the detail. This is impressive. It's survival. The empire I inherited from my father was built on fear and violence. That works short term, but eventually someone angrier and meaner comes along. I'd rather build something that has actual value beyond intimidation. Does it work? Mixing legitimate business with the other stuff. So far, Dante pulled the laptop back, but it's a constant balancing act. One wrong move and everything collapses. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Alessia drinking her tea, Dante reviewing his plans. It felt oddly domestic. Normal in a way nothing else at Blackwood Manor did. Can I ask you something? Dante said eventually. Turnabout's fair. What did you want to be before your father pulled you out of school? Before everything went to hell? What did you actually want? Alessia considered the question, pulling up memories she'd buried. I wanted to curate art, work in a museum maybe, or a gallery, help people understand why certain pieces mattered, how they connected to history and culture and human experience. She smiled sadly. My father said it was impractical, that art didn't make money unless you were selling it, and even then it was a sucker's game. Your father was a short-sighted idiot. The blunt assessment startled a laugh out of her. He built an empire. He built a network based on exploitation and fear. That's not the same as vision. Dante closed his laptop. You want to finish that degree? Focus on art, history, and curation. I'll make it happen. Remote learning, online courses, whatever you need. Why would you do that? Because you're going to be here anyway. Might as well do something you actually care about. He stood, gathering his papers. Think about it. Let Sophia know if you decide yes. He left her alone in the kitchen, tea going cold in her hands, feeling like something fundamental had shifted. Dante Falcone, crime lord, violent enforcer, man who broke people for crossing him, wanted her to pursue art history. Nothing about this situation made sense. But for the first time in years, Alessia felt something that might have been hope taking root. The following week brought a rhythm Alessia hadn't expected. Mornings in the library or working through online course catalogs, Sophia had helped her find. Afternoons exploring the grounds within the security perimeter. Getting used to the guards who nodded respectfully as she passed. Evenings were quieter, often spent reading or watching the forest from her windows. Dante appeared and disappeared on an unpredictable schedule, sometimes gone for days, sometimes present for meals that Sophia insisted they share. He didn't talk much about his work, but Alessia was learning to read his moods. The tension in his shoulders when a deal had gone wrong, the satisfaction when something fell into place. And slowly, carefully, she was learning not to flinch when he moved too quickly or spoke too sharply. He noticed. He always noticed. And his voice was gentle, his movement slow, like he was consciously making space for her to breathe. It was during dinner on the 9th day that everything changed. They were eating in relative silence when Rocco entered, his expression grim in a way that made Alessia's stomach drop. "Boss, we've got a problem. Your father-in-law just showed up at the main gate demanding to see his daughter." Alessia's blood went cold. Dante's expression went absolutely lethal. "He's not welcome here," Dante said, his voice deadly quiet. "I told him that he's insisting it's urgent, that he has information you need." Rocco glanced at Alessia, then back to Dante. "He's not leaving." Dante was silent for a long moment, tension coiling through him like a snake preparing to strike. Then he looked at Alessia, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "This is your choice," he said carefully. "You want to see him? I'll allow it with security present. You want me to remove him from the property? I'll do that too. But I need to know what you want." Alessia's hands were shaking. "I don't know." "Then think fast, because he's at my gate making noise. And I don't respond well to threats on my property." She took a breath, forcing herself to think past the panic. Her father was here. After 9 days of silence, he'd shown up at Blackwood Manor. That meant he wanted something. And with Luciano Moretti, that was never good. But she also realized something else. She wanted to face him. Wanted to look him in the eye without flinching, without making herself small, without accepting his assessment of her worth. "I'll see him," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. But not alone. Dante smiled, and it was absolutely vicious. Good answer. They met Luciano Moretti in Dante's main conference room, the kind of space designed for negotiating deals that could end careers or lives, depending on how the conversation went. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the grounds, security cameras in every corner, and Rocco stationed by the door with 2 other guards. The message was clear. This wasn't a family reunion. This was business conducted on Dante's territory by his rules. Alessia's father stood when they entered, his expensive suit immaculate, his expression carefully controlled. He looked exactly as he always did, cold, composed, absolutely certain of his own superiority. But his eyes flickered when he saw Alessia, something almost like surprise crossing his face before he buried it. "Alessia, you look well." She didn't respond, just moved to stand beside Dante, who'd positioned himself at the head of the table like the predator he was. "You've got 5 minutes?" Moretti. Dante's voice could have cut glass. Make them count. Luciano's jaw tightened at the dismissal, but he was smart enough not to argue. "I came to warn you. There's been talk in certain circles about your recent acquisition of my distribution routes. Some of my former associates are unhappy with the new arrangement." "Your former associates can be unhappy all they want. Doesn't change the contracts you signed." Dante leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed in a way that somehow made him more dangerous. "That's not why you're here." "No." Luciano's gaze shifted to Alessia, and she felt the familiar weight of his assessment, his judgment. "I need to speak with my daughter privately." "Not happening," Dante said flatly. "This is a family matter. You sold her to settle a debt. That makes her my concern now, not yours." Dante's voice went deadly quiet. "Anything you have to say, you say it here with witnesses, or you leave." Luciano's control cracked slightly, anger flashing across his features. "You can't actually believe this arrangement is permanent. She's my daughter. She's a person you treated like livestock." Dante gestured to Alessia without looking at her. "She wants you to leave. You're gone. She wants to hear what you have to say. I'll allow it. Her choice." The power shift was dizzying. Alessia had spent her entire life watching her father make decisions for her, about her, without her. And now Dante was handing her control like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her father seemed to recognize it too, his expression hardening. "Alessia, I need to explain something to you about the nature of my arrangement with Mr. Falcone." "I understand the arrangement perfectly." She heard herself say, "You needed his distribution network. He wanted your routes. I was the collateral that made the deal work. It's more complicated than that." "Is it?" Alessia felt something hot and sharp rising in her chest, years of silence burning away. "Because it seemed pretty straightforward when you signed those contracts. When you told me I was dismissed permanently. Luciano's face darkened. You have no idea what you're talking about. The business pressures I was under. The debts that needed settling. I don't care. The words came out stronger than she expected. You spent years making it clear I was worthless to you, a drain on your resources, an embarrassment you couldn't wait to be rid of. So you got rid of me. Done, Alessia. No. She took a step forward, and something in her father's expression shifted to something that might have been respect if he were capable of it. You came here for a reason that has nothing to do with checking on my well-being. So say what you need to say and leave. Silence stretched between them thick with years of resentment and unspoken damage. Finally, Luciano pulled a folder from his briefcase and set it on the table. There's a clause in the contracts I signed, a provision that allows me to buy back certain assets if I can provide equivalent value within 6 months. He slid the folder toward Dante. I'm prepared to make an offer. Dante didn't touch the folder. An offer for what exactly? The distribution routes. And Alessia. Luciano's voice was clinical businesslike. I've secured alternative partnerships that would give you the same access without the liability of having her here. Alessia felt the words like a physical blow. Of course, he wanted to undo the deal, and she was just part of the inventory being renegotiated. Let me make something very clear, Dante said, his voice going absolutely lethal. Alessia isn't an asset to be traded. She's not part of any renegotiation. And if you think you can walk into my house and bargain for her, like she's a piece of equipment, you're even more delusional than I thought. Be reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. You sold her. She's no longer your concern. Dante stood, and the temperature in the room dropped. And before you try to argue that this is about her well-being, let's be honest about what this is really about. You made a deal that gave me leverage over your operations. Now you're scrambling to undo it because you realized too late that you gave away more than you intended. Luciano's mask of composure cracked further. You don't know what you're dealing with. The people I'm involved with, the pressures they can bring to bear. Threats. Dante laughed, harsh and humorless. You're threatening me in my house. He moved around the table with predatory grace. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take your folder and your offers and your threats, and you're going to leave, and you're not coming back ever. Alessia. Her father turned to her, desperation bleeding through his carefully constructed walls. You don't have to stay here. Whatever he's told you, whatever promises he's made, you're still my daughter. I can protect you. The words were so absurd, they almost made her laugh. Protect me. You couldn't even stand to look at me after Mom died. You made me invisible, and when I stopped being useful as invisible, you made me gone. Alessia's voice shook, but she didn't back down. I don't need your protection. I don't want it. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. She crossed her arms, feeling Dante's presence beside her, like a wall of heat and violence barely contained. Leave. Luciano stared at her like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. The girl who'd learned to disappear wouldn't have spoken to him like this. Wouldn't have chosen a crime lord over her own father. But that girl was gone, burned away in the 9 days since she'd arrived at Blackwood Manor. This isn't over, Luciano said, grabbing his briefcase. Yeah, it is. Dante's voice was flat, final. Rocco, escort Mr. Moretti off the property and make it clear to the gate. He's not welcome back, ever. Rocco moved forward, and Luciano had enough survival instinct not to argue. He left without another word. His composure shattered, his power meaningless within Blackwood Manor's walls. The door closed behind him. Silence filled the conference room like water rushing into a vacuum. Alessia's knees went weak. She sank into a chair, adrenaline draining away and leaving her shaking. You okay? Dante's voice had gentled, the lethal edge gone. I don't know. She pressed her palms against her eyes. I just told my father to leave forever. You did, and you meant it. Yeah, the word came out broken. I meant it. Dante was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out a chair and sat beside her. Close but not touching. He's going to push back. Men like him don't accept defeat easily. I know. And there's going to be fallout, political pressure, maybe attempts to undermine my operations through his connections. Dante's jaw tightened. I need to know you're prepared for that. Alessia looked at him. This violent man who'd somehow become the safest person in her life. Are you asking if I'm going to change my mind? I'm asking if you understand what choosing to stay here means. It means I'm part of your world now, Your empire, your enemies, all of it. She took a shaky breath. It means my father's going to see me as a traitor, and it means whatever happens next, I'm in it. That's a lot to accept, so is everything else about this situation. Alessia managed a weak smile. But I'd rather be here dealing with your enemies and your empire than go back to being invisible in my father's house. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Something that looked almost like respect. You're tougher than you think. I'm terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He stood, offering his hand. Come on, you need a drink. They ended up in a smaller, more comfortable room Alessia hadn't seen before. Dante's private study, apparently, with leather furniture that looked actually lived in and bookshelves that held a surprising mix of business texts and literature. He poured her something amber from a crystal decanter. Whiskey. It'll help. Alessia took it, let the burn settle in her chest. My father looked surprised when he saw me. You look different than he expected. Dante poured his own drink considerably larger. Less broken. I was broken for a long time. Past tense. Working on it. She took another sip, feeling the warmth spread. Can I ask you something? You keep asking permission to ask questions. Just ask. Why didn't you take his offer? The renegotiation. You could have gotten the routes without the complication of having me here. Dante was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Because watching him try to buy you back, like you were a piece of property he'd misplaced, made me want to break every bone in his body. And because the idea of sending you back to that life made me angrier than anything else he's done. Alessia's breath caught. That's not very strategic. No, it's not. He met her gaze directly. But I meant what I said. You're not property, and I don't undo decisions just because they're inconvenient. Even when they complicate your empire. Especially then. Dante drained his glass. Your father's right about one thing. Keeping you here puts a target on both of us. His associates are going to see it as a weakness they can exploit. There will be attempts to use you as leverage. So what do? We make it very clear that touching you means dying slowly. The casual violence in his tone should have been frightening, but instead, Alessia felt something almost like safety, and you learn to defend yourself. Can't have you helpless if something goes wrong. Defend myself how? Shooting, basic combat, situational awareness. Rocco can teach you. Dante refilled both their glasses, and you're going to start sitting in on certain meetings, low-level stuff, nothing that puts you directly in danger. But you need to understand how my world works if you're going to survive in it. Alessia stared at him. You're serious? Completely. You want to be here? You're going to be prepared. I'm not losing assets because they were too naive to see threats coming. Assets. She repeated the word, trying to figure out if she was offended. People, Dante corrected, something almost like humor touching his expression. I'm not losing people. Better marginally. They drank in comfortable silence for a while. Outside the windows, night had fallen completely, turning the forest into shadows and secrets. Somewhere in that darkness, guards patrolled, cameras recorded, and Dante's empire continued its careful, violent work. I should let you sleep, Dante said eventually. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Why? Because word's going to spread that your father showed up here and left empty-handed. That's going to send a message to everyone who's been watching our arrangement. He stood, rolling tension from his shoulders. Some will see it as strength, others will see it as an opening. And an opening for what? To test whether I've gotten soft, whether having you here is a weakness they can exploit. His smile was absolutely vicious. They're going to be disappointed. Alessia stood as well, setting down her empty glass. Thank you for not making me see him alone, for letting me choose. It was always your choice. Dante moved toward the door, then paused. And Alessia, what you said to him about not needing his protection, that took guts. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. He held her gaze. Get some rest. Training starts at 7. The next morning came too early. Rocco met her in what turned out to be a fully equipped gym in Blackwood Manor's lower level, complete with shooting range and what looked like a small armory. Boss says, you need to learn self-defense. Rocco handed her a Glock, with the casual ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. We're starting with firearms because they're the most effective equalizer. Alessia stared at the weapon in her hands. I've never shot a gun before. I know. That's why we're starting now. He moved behind her, adjusting her grip. First rule, Never point it at anything you're not willing to destroy. Second rule, assume it's always loaded. Third rule, don't hesitate if you need to use it. The weight of the gun was terrifying and empowering in equal measure. Rocco walked her through basics: stance, sight alignment, trigger control. By the end of the first hour, her hands were shaking from adrenaline and her ears were ringing despite the protection. "Not bad," Rocco said as they cleared the weapons. "You've got steady hands. That's half the battle." The other half being willing to actually shoot someone if it comes to it. He gave her a level look. "Can you do that? If someone's trying to hurt you, can you pull the trigger?" Alessia thought about it honestly. A week ago, she would have said no, but something had changed. The girl who'd learned to be invisible had been willing to endure anything to survive. The woman she was becoming understood that survival sometimes meant fighting back. "Yes," she said finally. "If I have to, yes." "Good. We'll keep training." The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Mornings with Rocco, learning to shoot, to fight, to read situations for danger. Afternoons working through online courses Sophia had helped her enroll in. Art history, cultural studies, everything she'd been forced to abandon years ago. Evenings were sometimes spent in Dante's company, sometimes alone, but never with the crushing loneliness that had defined her life before. And slowly, Alessia began to understand the intricate machinery of Dante's empire. She sat in on meetings where distribution routes were negotiated with clinical precision, watched him handle territorial disputes with a combination of psychology and barely veiled threats, saw firsthand how he balanced legitimate business ventures with the darker work that actually funded everything. It should have horrified her. Maybe it did on some level. But it was also fascinating watching someone operate with such absolute confidence, such unwavering control. 2 weeks after her father's visit, everything changed again. Alessia was in the library when Sophia found her, the older woman's face pale and tight with worry. "You need to come with me now." "What's wrong?" "Just come." They hurried through corridors to the security hub where monitors showed feeds from cameras around the estate. Rocco stood surrounded by guards, all of them armed, all of them focused on a particular screen. "Where's Dante?" Alessia asked. "Incoming." Rocco pointed at a feed showing the main gate. "He's got company." The screen showed Dante's SUV pulling through, followed by 3 other vehicles that definitely didn't belong to Blackwood Manor's security. Men in tactical gear out, surrounding the cars with military precision. "Who are they?" Alessia's stomach clenched. "Trouble." Rocco keyed his radio. "All units defensive positions." "This is not a drill." The men on the screen weren't attacking. Not yet, but their presence was clearly a message. Dante emerged from his vehicle, utterly composed, despite being outnumbered at least 2 to 1. "Can we hear this?" Alessia asked. Rocco flipped a switch and audio crackled through. "Wasn't expecting a welcoming committee," Dante was saying, his voice carrying the dangerous calm that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Mr. Falcone," the voice that answered was smooth, cultured, absolutely cold. "We need to discuss certain recent developments. Specifically your arrangement with Luciano Moretti. My arrangements are my business, not when they affect our operations." A man stepped forward, older than Dante, wearing an expensive suit that somehow made him look more threatening, not less. "Moretti had commitments to us. By acquiring his assets, you've inherited those obligations. I inherited his distribution routes, nothing else. We disagree, and we're here to clarify expectations." Dante's laugh was harsh. "You brought 20 armed men to my property to clarify expectations. That's an interesting negotiating tactic. It's a demonstration of how seriously we take this matter." The older man gestured to the estate. "You have something that belongs to our organization. We want it back." Alessia's blood went cold. They were talking about her. Had to be. Her father must have made deals, used her as collateral in ways even the contracts hadn't covered. "Nothing on this property belongs to you," Dante said, his voice going lethal. "The girl, Moretti's daughter. She was promised to us as part of a prior arrangement. Your acquisition of her violated that agreement. Then Moretti violated it, not me. Take it up with him." "We did. He suggested we discuss the matter with you directly, hence our visit." On the monitors, Alessia could see Dante's hands flex, tension coiling through him. "Let me make this very simple. Alessia Moretti is under my protection. She's not going anywhere, and if you think you can walk onto my property and make demands, you've severely miscalculated. Mr. Falcone, We're done here. Dante turned toward the house. You've got 60 seconds to get off my land before this gets unpleasant. The older man's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. No, you made the mistake. Dante's voice carried across the courtyard, absolute and final. Coming here, threatening what's mine. That's the kind of mistake people don't recover from. We'll be back, looking forward to it. The vehicles retreated slowly, making it clear they were leaving by choice, not because they were intimidated, but they left. And once the gates closed behind them, Dante's entire demeanor changed, fury replacing the cold control. He stormed into the security hub. Moments later, his eyes finding Alessia immediately. You heard? She nodded, unable to speak past the fear lodged in her throat. Rocco, I want triple patrols and background checks on every staff member. If there's anyone who wasn't vetted personally, they're gone. Dante paced like a caged animal. Run deep surveillance on the Russo family. I want to know every business they run, every politician they own, every skeleton in every closet. Already on it, boss. Dante finally stopped moving, his gaze locked on Alessia. We need to talk my study now. She followed him through the house, her heart hammering. In the study, he closed the door and immediately poured whiskey for both of them. Your father sold you twice, he said without preamble. Once to me, once to the Russos. Probably thought he could play us against each other and profit from both deals. I didn't know. I know you didn't. This is his mess. Dante drained his glass, but it's become our problem. The Russos run the Western territories. They're powerful, well-connected, and they don't back down easily. If they think you're promised to them, they're going pupsh until they either get you or destroy me trying. Alessia sank into a chair, feeling the weight of it crushing down. So, what do? We make it impossible for them to take you. Dante crouched in front of her, his expression intense. There's a way to end this permanently, but you're not going to like it. Tell me, we get married. The words hung in the air like smoke. Alessia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. What? Legal marriage. Binding, documented, impossible to contest. Dante's voice was steady, clinical. If you're my wife, you're part of my family, untouchable under the old codes that still govern how families like the Russos operate. They can't claim you without declaring war on my entire organization. That's insane. It's strategy, he stood, moving to the windows. And it's the only option that doesn't end with them trying to take you by force or me starting a war. I might not win. Alessia's mind was reeling. You're asking me to marry you. I'm offering you a solution that keeps you safe and solves my political problem with the Russos. He turned back to her. It would be on paper only, a business arrangement. You'd keep your own space, your own life. Nothing would change except your last name and your legal status. Everything would change. Yeah, Dante's jaw tightened. It would. But the alternative is worse. She stood crossing to him, needing to see his face clearly. Why? Why are you willing to do this? Because letting them take you isn't an option. His voice went rough. Because I made you a promise that you'd be safe here, and I don't break my promises. And because he trailed off, something unreadable crossing his expression. Because what? Because you matter. The words came out harsh, like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. You matter to me, and I protect what's mine. Alessia felt tears burning behind her eyes. I'm not yours. Then what are you? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither of them had been willing to examine. What was she? Not property, not an asset, not just a complication in his empire, something else. Something that had been growing in the spaces between violence and protection, between fear and safety. I don't know, she admitted, but I know I don't want to go with the Russos. I know I don't want to leave here, she took a breath. And I know that if marriage is what it takes to stay, then yes, I'll do it. Dante's eyes widened slightly, surprise breaking through his control. You're sure? No, but I'm choosing it anyway. Alessia managed a shaky smile. Seems to be my thing lately, making choices I'm not sure about. This is different. This is permanent. So is everything else about this situation. She held his gaze. Make the arrangements. I'll sign whatever papers you need. He studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression that looked almost like wonder. Then he nodded. All business again. I'll have my lawyers draw up the contracts. We'll do it quietly. Just witnesses for legal purposes and Alessia. Yeah? You can still change your mind right up until you sign. I won't hold it against you. But they both knew she wouldn't. The girl who'd been sold to settle debts had learned to make her own choices. And she was choosing this, choosing him, choosing safety, choosing a future that was hers to shape. Even if that future started with a marriage to a man who dealt in violence and power and secrets that could destroy them both. 3 days later, Alessia Moretti became Alessia Falcone in a ceremony that lasted less than 10 minutes and changed absolutely everything. The judge was a man in his 60s who asked no questions about why they were getting married in Dante's private study with armed guards outside the door. He read the standard vows in a monotone that suggested he'd done this particular favor many times before, took their signatures on documents that carried more legal weight than romance, and left with an envelope that probably contained enough money to ensure his discretion. Sophia and Rocco served as witnesses, both of them signing where indicated without commentary. When it was done, Alessia stared at the marriage certificate with her new name on it and felt like she'd stepped off a cliff into empty air. "That's it," she said quietly. "That's it." Dante dismissed the judge with a nod, waiting until the man was gone before pouring drinks for all of them. Legally binding, internationally recognized, and completely unbreakable without both parties consenting to divorce. "Romantic," Rocco muttered, earning a sharp look from Sophia. "It's practical," Dante corrected. "And it solves our immediate problem with the Russos." He handed Alessia a glass. "We'll release the information strategically. Let it filter through the right channels so they understand the situation has changed." Alessia took the whiskey, but didn't drink. Her hand was shaking slightly, the enormity of what they'd just done settling over her like a weight. She was married to a crime lord, and not even for love or passion, or any of the reasons people usually bound their lives together. "You okay?" Dante's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "I just legally tied myself to someone I've known for less than a month." She managed a weak laugh. "I'm processing. Take your time." He raised his glass to strategy over sentiment, and to not getting killed by the Russos, Rocco added. They drank. Sophia excused herself to handle whatever mysterious tasks kept Blackwood Manor running smoothly, leaving Alessia alone with Dante and Rocco. "Boss, we need to discuss security protocols," Rocco said. Now that she's officially family, the threat assessment changes. "I know." Dante moved to his desk, pulling up files on his tablet. "Double her protection detail. I want eyes on her anytime she's not in the secure areas of the house. And run a full analysis on potential extraction scenarios. If the Russos try something stupid, I want contingencies ready." "You think they'll actually try to take her?" Alessia asked. "I think they'll probe for weaknesses first. Test our defenses, see how serious we are about protection." Dante's jaw tightened, but yeah, eventually they might try. Marriage or not, men like the Russos don't accept losing what they think they're owed. Rocco nodded. "I'll coordinate with the perimeter teams and boss. Congratulations." "Sort of. Get out of here." Rocco left with what might have been a smile, leaving Alessia alone with her new husband. The word felt foreign, impossible. Husband, like she'd learned a new language overnight and was expected to be fluent. "You're allowed to regret this," Dante said quietly. "I don't. Not yet. Anyway." Alessia finally took a sip of whiskey, letting it burn. "But I'm allowed to be terrified." "Fair enough." He came around the desk to stand in front of her. "We should talk about logistics, how this actually works day to day." "Okay. You keep your room in the East Wing. I stay in the West. We maintain separate spaces, separate lives as much as possible, while still presenting a united front publicly." His voice was clinical, laying out terms like they were negotiating a business contract, which Alessia supposed they were. "You attend events when I need you to play the role when it matters. Otherwise, you do whatever you want. That's it. We just coexist. Unless you want something different." Dante's eyes met hers, and something unreadable flickered there. This doesn't have to be complicated. It's a legal protection, nothing more. Alessia knew she should feel relieved. Instead, she felt oddly hollow, like something important had just been defined into insignificance. "And if people ask questions about why we got married so suddenly, we tell them it's none of their fucking business." He moved back to the windows, tension coiling in his shoulders. "Or we say it was strategic, which is true, right?" "Right. Strategic." Silence stretched between them, awkward in a way their previous interactions hadn't been. They'd found an odd rhythm over the past weeks. Not quite friendship, not quite employer and dependent, something else. But marriage had shifted, the dynamic created expectations and boundaries, that neither of them seemed sure how to navigate. "I should let you process," Dante said eventually. "Take the rest of the day. Tomorrow we start implementing the new security protocols." Alessa nodded and left, her marriage certificate still clutched in one hand, feeling more alone than she had since arriving at Blackwood Manor. The next week was a masterclass in controlled information warfare. Dante's people released news of the marriage through carefully selected channels, letting it spread through the criminal networks that govern the Eastern Territories. The response was immediate and varied. Some saw it as a power move, others as a weakness, most as a complication that required reassessment. The Russos went silent, which Rocco said was worse than open aggression. "They're planning," he told Alessia during one of their training sessions, "figuring out angles, looking for leverage." She fired at the target downrange, her grouping getting tighter with each session. And when they find it, then things get interesting. Rocco cleared the weapon when she finished the magazine. "You're getting good at this. Most people take months to shoot this accurately. Survival is a good motivator." That it is. Alessia saw less of Dante in the days following the wedding. He was consumed with managing fallout, shoring up alliances, making it clear to everyone in his world that touching his wife meant war. When they did interact, it was formal, distant, like they were strangers playing roles rather than two people who'd somehow found an unexpected connection. It bothered her more than it should have. 2 weeks after the ceremony, Sophia found Alessia in the library and announced she had a visitor. "Who?" Didn't give a name, but she's got Russo written all over her. Sophia's expression was grim. Security cleared her, but Rocco wants you armed during the meeting. Alessia's stomach clenched. "Where's Dante?" "Handling business in the city. Won't be back for hours." Sophia handed her a compact Glock. "You know how to use this now. Don't hesitate if you need to." The visitor waited in a formal sitting room Alessia had never used. All expensive furniture and carefully curated art. She was younger than Alessia expected, maybe early 30s, beautiful in a way that looked engineered, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than a car. "Mrs. Falcone." The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Isabella Russo. Thank you for seeing me." "I wasn't aware I had a choice." Alessia sat across from her, hyper-aware of the gun concealed under her cardigan and the guard stationed just outside the door. "We always have choices, though sometimes the options are equally unappealing." Isabella crossed her legs, utterly composed. "I came to deliver a message for my family. I'm listening. Your husband made a bold move marrying you. It complicated a situation that should have been simple." Isabella's voice was pleasant, conversational, like they were discussing the weather. "My brother was promised a wife to cement certain alliances. Your father agreed to the arrangement. Then suddenly, you're unavailable. My father makes a lot of promises he doesn't keep. Clearly, but that puts us in an awkward position." Isabella leaned forward slightly. "We could go to war with Dante Falcone over this. Lots of bloodshed, destroyed operations, years of rebuilding. Or we could find an alternative solution." "What kind of solution?" "You leave him quietly. Willingly. We provide you with resources. A new identity, safety from both your husband and your father." Isabella's smile widened. "You get your freedom. We get to save face. Everyone wins." Alessia felt anger flare hot and bright. Except Dante loses his wife and looks weak to every other family watching this situation. He'll recover. Men like him always do. Isabella's tone suggested this was obvious. You, on the other hand, are trapped in a marriage to a violent criminal who used you as a political pawn. Don't you want out? No. The word came out harder than Alessia intended. Isabella's smile faltered. "You can't actually want to stay here. What I want isn't your concern." Alessia stood done with this conversation. "You can tell your family that I'm not leaving. Not quietly, not willingly, not at all. And if they try to make me, they'll find out exactly how seriously my husband takes threats against what's his." Isabella rose as well, her composure cracking slightly. "You're making a mistake. Dante Falcone doesn't love you. He married you for strategy. You're a tool to him. Nothing more. Maybe, but I'd rather be a tool with choices than a bride traded like livestock." Alessia moved toward the door. "This meeting is over. He's going to destroy you." Isabella called after her. "Men like him destroy everything they touch." Alessia paused at the threshold. "Then I guess we'll burn together." "Seems preferable to whatever your brother had planned." She left Isabella standing in the sitting room and went straight to the security hub where Rocco was already reviewing footage of the meeting. "Heard most of that," he said. "You handled it well. She offered me an escape." Alessia sank into a chair, adrenaline making her hands shake. Resources, new identity, freedom. "And you told her to fuck off." "Good. Was it?" Alessia looked at him. "Maybe she's right. Maybe Dante is just using me and I'm too stupid to see it." Rocco gave her a long measuring look. "You know what I've noticed in 8 years working for the boss? He doesn't do anything halfway. When he commits to something, he commits completely. And he committed to keeping you safe." He gestured at the monitors showing Blackwood Manor's extensive security. "All of this, the marriage, the protection details, the political maneuvering, that's not strategy. That's personal." He said it was just business. "Yeah. He says a lot of things doesn't make them true." Rocco pulled up a different camera feed showing Dante's private study. "He's been working 18-hour days since the wedding, shoring up defenses, making sure you're untouchable. That's not what you do for a business arrangement." Alessia stared at the empty study, trying to reconcile Rocco's words with Dante's careful distance. "Then why does he barely look at me anymore? Because he's scared." Rocco's voice gentled. "The boss doesn't do relationships, doesn't trust people enough to let them close. But you're different. You got under his defenses, and now he doesn't know what to do about it." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? You're the first person in years who's made him question his own rules." Rocco shut down the monitors. "Give him time. He'll figure it out." That night, Alexica couldn't sleep. She kept replaying Isabella's visit, Rocco's observations, the strange emptiness that had settled into her marriage before it even really began. Around midnight, she gave up and went downstairs, looking for tea and quiet. She found Dante instead, sitting at the kitchen island with blueprints spread across the granite and a bottle of whiskey keeping him company. "Thought you were in the city," she said. He looked up, and the exhaustion in his expression was stark. "Came back early. Heard you had a visitor. Isabella Russo. She offered me an escape route." Dante's hands flexed. And I told her no." Alessia moved to the stove, needing something to do with her hands. "She thinks I'm insane for staying. Maybe you are." His voice was rough. "This isn't a fairy tale, Alessia. It's not going to end with happily ever after." "I know that." She poured water into the kettle with more force than necessary, "but it's still better than anything else I've had." Silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither of them seemed able to say. Alessia focused on making tea, trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. "I'm sorry," Dante said quietly. She turned, surprised. "For what?" "For dragging you deeper into this. The marriage was supposed to protect you, but all it's done is paint a bigger target on your back." He scrubbed a hand over his face. "The Russos aren't going to stop, and there are others circling now, seeing weakness, seeing opportunity. Then we deal with them." "We?" He laughed bitterly. "This isn't your fight." "Yes, it is." Alessia crossed to him, anger replacing the uncertainty that had been plaguing her. "I chose to stay. I chose to marry you. That makes it my fight too. You don't know what you're talking about." "Stop." She slammed her hand on the counter, surprising them both. "Stop treating me like I'm fragile, like I'm going to break if things get hard. I've been breaking my entire life, and I'm still here." Dante stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "You have no idea what you're asking for." "Then tell me, stop hiding behind distance and strategy and pretending this is just business." Alessia's voice shook. "Tell me what you're actually afraid of." "Losing you." The words came out harsh, like they'd been dragged from somewhere deep. "I'm afraid of losing you. To the Ruzzos, to your father, to whoever else decides you're worth taking, or worse. I'm afraid of being the reason you get hurt." The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Alessia felt her breath catch. "You can't lose what you never really had," she said softly. "Can't I?" Dante stood, and suddenly he was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. "Because from where I'm standing, I've had you since the moment I walked into your father's study and saw what he'd done to you. And the idea of anyone taking that away makes me want to burn the entire world down." Alessia's heart was hammering. "That's not business. No, it's not." His voice dropped. "It stopped being business the first time you stood up to your father. When you chose to stay here, knowing what I am. When you said yes to a marriage that should have terrified you, but instead you treated it like the most natural thing in the world." "It terrified me," she admitted. It still does. Good. You should be terrified. Dante reached out, his hand hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her, but wasn't sure he was allowed, because this thing between us, whatever it is, it's dangerous. It makes me weak. And weakness gets people killed in my world. Or maybe it makes you stronger. Alessia closed the distance, letting his hand finally make contact, his palm warm against her cheek. Maybe it has something to protect instead of just an empire to maintain, gives you a reason to be better than your father was. I'm not better than him. You're not him, period. She held his gaze. And I'm tired of pretending that this is just strategy, that we're just two people coexisting in the same house, because it hasn't felt that way for a while now. Dante's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and the tenderness of it made her breath hitch. What does it feel like? Like, maybe I'm not invisible anymore. Her voice cracked, like maybe someone finally sees me, really sees me. I see you. The words were fierce, certain. I've seen you from the beginning. That's the problem. Why is that a problem? Because seeing you, wanting you, caring about you, that makes you the most dangerous thing in my life. His other hand came up to frame her face. The Russos, your father, every enemy I've made, they'll all use you against me if they can, and I can't lose you. I won't. Then don't. Alessia rose on her toes, closing the last bit of distance. Don't lose me. Don't push me away. Just be here. Dante kissed her like he'd been holding himself back for weeks, and finally ran out of restraint. It was desperate and consuming, and nothing like Alessia had imagined when she'd let herself think about this possibility in the dark quiet of her room. His hands slid into her hair, angling her head, and she gripped his shirt like it was the only thing keeping her upright. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. This changes everything, he said roughly. I know. The rules I set about keeping separate lives, separate spaces, were stupid. Alessia smiled despite everything. We're married. Maybe we should try actually acting like it. You have no idea what you're signing up for. Then show me. He kissed her again, slower this time, thorough, like he was memorizing the taste of her. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark, with something that made heat pull low in Alessia's stomach. Come with me, he said, taking her hand. He led her through Blackwood Manor's corridors to the West Wing, she'd been told, was off limits, its private space. The door to his suite opened onto rooms that were surprisingly lived in. Books scattered across surfaces, expensive but comfortable furniture, windows overlooking the forest. It was less fortress and more home than she'd expected. This is where you actually live, she said, taking it in. Yeah, less formal than the rest of the house. Dante pulled her closer, his hands settling on her hips. Less performance. I like it. I was hoping you would. He hesitated, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. We don't have to. I mean, if you're not ready. Alessia silenced him with a kiss, pouring everything she couldn't articulate into it. The fear, the hope, the impossible situation they'd found themselves in. When she pulled back, she was smiling. I'm ready. I've been ready. I just needed you to stop treating this like a business transaction. I can do that. His smile was slow, dangerous, absolutely devastating. But, fair warning, I'm not good at gentle. Good. She pulled him toward the bedroom. Neither am I. Later, tangled in sheets that were softer than anything Alessia had ever touched, she traced patterns on Dante's chest and tried to process how drastically her life had changed in less than a month. From invisible daughter to crime lord's wife, from broken to something that felt almost whole. What are you thinking? Dante's voice was rough with exhaustion. That a month ago I didn't know you existed, and now I'm lying in your bed trying to figure out how I got here. Regrets? No. She propped herself up to look at him. Confusion, maybe disbelief, but not regret. He pulled her back down, pressing a kiss to her temple. The Russos are going to push harder now. They'll see this as evidence that you matter, that you're not just a strategic piece, but something real. Let them push. You say that now. I say that because it's true. Alessia met his gaze. I'm not the girl my father sold anymore. I'm not someone who makes herself small and hopes to be ignored. I'm your wife. That means something. Yeah, it does. Dante's arms tightened around her. It means you're mine and I protect what's mine. Possessive. Completely. He didn't sound remotely apologetic. You have a problem with that? No. She settled against him, feeling safer than she had any right to feel given the circumstances. I really don't. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. And for the first time since her mother died, Alessia didn't dream of being invisible. She dreamed of fire and blood, and standing beside someone who saw her as an equal, not a burden. The next morning brought reality crashing back. Rocco was waiting outside Dante's suite with an expression that meant trouble. "Boss, we've got a situation." Dante was immediately alert. All traces of the softer man from last night buried under the crime lord persona. What kind? The kind where 3 of our warehouses just got hit simultaneously. Professional job, coordinated timing. They knew exactly where to strike to do maximum damage without triggering full alarm protocols. Casualties? 2 wounded, none dead. But they took product worth close to 2 million and destroyed another million in infrastructure. Rocco's jaw was tight. This has Russo written all over it. Dante's expression went absolutely lethal. How'd they get past our security? Inside information had to be. Rocco pulled up footage on a tablet. They moved like they had blueprints. Knew where every camera blind spot was. Alessia watched Dante's hands flex, violence coiling in every line of his body. This was the man Isabella had warned her about, the one who destroyed everything he touched. But she wasn't afraid. She was angry. "What do we do?" she asked. Both men looked at her. "We," Dante repeated slowly. "Yes, we." Alessia crossed her arms. "They did this because of me, because I refused to leave. So, what's the plan?" Rocco glanced at Dante, who was studying Alessia with an unreadable expression. "The plan," Dante said carefully, "is that I handle this while you stay safe." Wrong answer, Alessia. "No." She moved closer to him, refusing to back down. "You said I matter. That protecting me was personal, not strategy." "Well, this is personal too. They're attacking you to get to me. So either we face them together, or you admit that this whole thing, the marriage last night, all of it, was just you keeping your assets secured." Silence stretched between them. Then, unexpectedly, Dante smiled. It was sharp and dangerous and full of dark promise. "You're really not going to make this easy, are you? Not even a little bit." "Fine," he turned to Rocco. "Set up a meeting with the Russos. Neutral territory, full security, and make it clear that my wife will be attending." Rocco's eyebrows rose. "Boss, that's non-negotiable. If they want to play games, we're going to remind them exactly who they're dealing with." Dante's gaze didn't leave Alessia's face. "Both of us. This is a bad idea," Rocco muttered. But he was already pulling out his phone. Dante waited until Rocco stepped away before pulling Alessia close. "You understand what you're asking for? Walking into that meeting means you're not just my wife on paper. You're my partner, my equal. And that makes you a target for everyone who wants to take me down. I know, and you're still willing. I told you last night I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not helpless. And I'm done letting other people make decisions about my life." She held his gaze. "So yes, I'm willing." Dante kissed her hard and fast. "Then let's show the Russos what happens when they underestimate a Falcone." The meeting was set for a waterfront warehouse that belonged to neither family. Neutral ground in theory, though Alessia suspected neutrality was a polite fiction when armed guards from both sides lined the perimeter. She rode with Dante in the lead SUV, Rocco and 4 other security personnel surrounding them in a convoy that screamed power and careful preparation. "You don't have to do this," Dante said for the 3rd time since they'd left Blackwood Manor. "Yes, I do." Alessia checked the Glock concealed at her hip, the weight of it reassuring. "And you need to stop asking. Just making sure you understand what you're walking into. A room full of criminals who think I'm a weakness they can exploit." She met his gaze. "I understand perfectly." Dante's smile was sharp. "Good, because the second we walk through those doors, you're not just my wife. You're a Falcone. That means you don't flinch, you don't apologize, and you sure as hell don't back down. I stopped flinching weeks ago." "Yeah, you did." He took her hand, squeezing once. "Stay close to me, and if shooting starts, you get behind Rocco and let the professionals handle it." "If shooting starts, I'm handling it myself." "Alessia, Mary quick learner. Deal with it." Rocco snorted from the front seat. "She's got you there, boss." The warehouse was exactly as grim as Alessia expected. Concrete floors, exposed beams, the smell of salt water and rust. The Russos had arrived first, establishing territory. A power play that Dante ignored completely as he walked in like he owned the place. Alessia stayed at his side, spine straight, refusing to show the nerves churning in her stomach. The Russo patriarch was there, Lorenzo, older than his daughter Isabella, but with the same calculated cruelty in his eyes. His son stood beside him, the one who'd apparently been promised Alessia as a bride. He was handsome in an obvious way, all sharp suits and sharper smiles, and the way he looked at her made her skin crawl. Falcone. Lorenzo's voice was gravelly, rough from decades of cigarettes and violence. You brought your wife. How domestic. I brought my partner. Dante's correction was deliberate. Alessia, meet Lorenzo Russo, the man who thought he could steal from me without consequences. Steal is a strong word. I prefer reclaimed what was promised. Lorenzo's gaze slid to Alessia, assessing. She's prettier than the photos suggested. I can see why you wanted to keep her. Careful, Dante said quietly, and the temperature in the room dropped. Relax, I'm simply appreciating my son's loss. Lorenzo gestured to the young man beside him. This is Marco. He was quite looking forward to the arrangement your wife's father negotiated. Marco stepped forward, and Alessia fought the urge to step back. Mrs. Falcone, a pleasure, even under these circumstances. I doubt that. She kept her voice level. Given you just cost my husband $2 million in product and infrastructure to prove a point. $3 million, actually. You missed the third warehouse in the Northern District. Marco's smile was all teeth. And the point was proven. You're a liability, a weak spot we can exploit whenever necessary. Then you're stupider than you look, Alessia said before Dante could respond. Because attacking us doesn't make me want to leave. It makes me want to put a bullet in you. Silence crashed through the warehouse. Lorenzo's eyebrows rose. Marco's smile faltered. Even Dante looked slightly surprised. Bold words from someone who's only been in this world a month, Lorenzo said. Bold enough to mean them. Alessia held his gaze. You think I'm a weakness because I'm new, because I grew up in this life. But you're wrong. I'm not afraid of you. And I'm not leaving my husband because you threw a tantrum. A tantrum that cost millions that you'll pay back with interest. Dante's voice cut through like a blade. That's why we're here. To discuss terms of restitution. Lorenzo laughed harsh and humorless. You think I'm paying you back for what? Protecting what should have been mine in the first place. She was never yours, Dante said flatly. Her father made promises he had no authority to make. That's on him, not us. Then perhaps we should discuss this with Luciano Moretti directly. Lorenzo pulled out his phone and Alessia's stomach dropped. He's been quite eager to help us resolve this situation. The doors opened and her father walked in, flanked by two men Alessia didn't recognize. He looked smaller than she remembered, diminished somehow, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, utterly devoid of paternal feeling. Alessia. He didn't sound surprised to see her. Still playing house with Falcone, I see. Still selling people who trust you, she shot back. Luciano's expression didn't change. I came to correct a mistake. The contracts I signed with Mr. Falcone were executed under duress. I'm prepared to void them and return to our original arrangement with the Russos. Duress? Dante's laugh was dangerous. You came to me begging for those roots. I have recordings, which won't hold up legally given the circumstances. Luciano pulled out his own folder, setting it on a nearby crate. I've had lawyers review everything. The marriage, the transfers, all of it. There are grounds to contest. On what basis? Rocco demanded. On the basis that my daughter was coerced into a marriage she didn't want, signed contracts under psychological pressure, and is currently being held against her will by a known criminal enterprise. Luciano's voice was smooth, practiced. I'm here to bring her home where she belongs. Alessia felt rage ignite in her chest, white-hot and consuming. Home? You sold me. You told me I was dismissed permanently, and now you want to pretend you care about my well-being. I made a business decision I've come to regret. Luciano said like he was discussing a bad investment. I'm offering you a way out. Come with me now, and we can undo all of this. You can go back to school, have a normal life. I don't want normal. The words exploded out of her. I want the life I've built with Dante at Blackwood Manor. Away from you and your manipulation and your complete inability to see me as anything other than a piece on your chessboard. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. Alessia moved closer to her father, and she saw something flicker in his eyes that might have been fear. You want to know what Dante's given me? A choice. Agency. The ability to make my own decisions without someone telling me I'm worthless. That's more than you ever offered. He's a criminal, Luciano hissed. He's using you. Maybe, but at least he sees me when he does it. She smiled sharp and bitter. You looked through me my entire life, So forgive me if I choose the man who actually acknowledges I exist. Lorenzo cleared his throat. Touching as this family reunion is, we're here to settle business. Luciano, you said you could deliver the girl. Can you or can't you? I can. Luciano's hand shot out, grabbing Alessia's wrist. She's coming with me. He didn't finish the sentence. Dante moved with lethal speed, breaking Luciano's grip and slamming him against the nearest concrete pillar hard enough to crack bone. The gun that appeared in Dante's hand seemed to materialize from nowhere, pressed under Luciano's jaw. Touch her again, Dante said, his voice absolutely dead, and I'll kill you where you stand. Boss. Rocco's warning was quiet. We're outnumbered here. Don't care. Dante didn't take his eyes off Luciano. This piece of shit thinks he can put his hands on my wife. He's lucky I don't gut him right now. Dante. Alessia's voice cut through the violence. Let him go. He touched you, and I can handle it. She moved closer, putting her hand on Dante's arm. Let him go, please. Dante held her gaze for a long moment, something warring in his expression. Then slowly, he lowered the gun and stepped back. Luciano slumped, breathing hard. You're insane, Luciano gasped. Both of you. No, Alessia said quietly. I'm just done being your victim. She turned to Lorenzo. You want to resolve this? Here's how it works. You accept that I'm Dante's wife, that I chose this, and you stop attacking his operations, trying to change my mind. And if we don't, Marco challenged, then we escalate. Dante's voice was still. You hit 3 warehouses, I'll hit 6 of yours. You touch one of my people, I'll dismantle your entire Western operation, piece by piece, and your father knows I have the resources and the reach to do it. Lorenzo's expression was calculating. You'd start a war over a woman. I'd burn both our empires to ash before I let anyone take her from me. Dante's certainty was absolute. So you need to decide, is your pride worth losing everything you've built? Silence stretched between the families, tension coiling so tight it felt like the air might shatter. Then Lorenzo laughed rough and surprised. You actually love her. That's irrelevant, Dante said flatly. No, it's not, because it means you're compromised, weak. Lorenzo's smile was predatory, and that's valuable information. It means I'm motivated. Dante's hand found Alessia's squeezing. There's a difference. We'll see. Lorenzo turned to Luciano. Your daughter's made her choice. I suggest you accept it before you lose what little leverage you have left. This isn't over, Luciano started. Yes, it is. Alessia's voice was final. I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm a Falcone. And if you come after me or my husband again, you'll find out exactly what that means. Luciano stared at her like she was a stranger. Maybe she was. The broken girl he'd sold was gone, replaced by someone harder, sharper, capable of standing in a warehouse full of criminals and holding her ground. You've made a mistake, he said quietly. No, you made the mistake when you treated me like I was disposable. Alessia straightened her shoulders. I'm done here. Dante, we're leaving. Dante kept his gun visible as they backed toward the exit. Rocco and the security team covering their retreat. And Russo, you come at us again. There won't be another meeting, just bodies. They made it to the vehicles without incident, though Alessia could feel eyes tracking them the entire way. Once they were in the SUV and moving, she finally let herself shake. That was reckless, Rocco said from the front seat. That was necessary, Dante corrected. He pulled Alessia against him, and she buried her face in his shoulder, breathing hard. You did good. Better than good. I threatened to shoot someone. Yeah, you did. Marco deserved it. Dante's hand rubbed circles on her back. But more importantly, you made it clear you're not a victim. You're a player. That changes how everyone sees this situation. Does it? Alessia looked up at him. Because from where I'm sitting, we just made a lot of enemies. We solidified our position. There's a difference. He kissed her forehead. The Russos won't back off completely, but they'll think twice before directly attacking again. And your father just lost whatever credibility he had with both sides. Good. The word came out fierce. He deserves worse. He'll get it eventually. Dante's smile was dark. But right now, we need to focus on shoring up security and making sure this doesn't escalate into open war. The next few weeks were a blur of strategic maneuvering and careful violence. Dante's people fortified the warehouses that had been hit, implemented new security protocols, and quietly removed the insider who'd given the Russos their intelligence. Alessia didn't ask what happened to the traitor. She didn't need to. She focused instead on her studies, finally enrolled in online courses that would let her finish her degree. Art history felt almost absurdly normal given everything else in her life, but she loved it. Loved losing herself in discussions of Renaissance painting and modern sculpture, analyzing why certain works endured while others faded. Sophia helped her set up a small studio in one of Blackwood Manor's unused rooms, and Alessia started sketching again for the first time since her mother died. Rough charcoal drawings of the forest, the estate, Dante, when he thought she wasn't looking. It felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she'd thought was gone forever. "You're good at this," Dante said one evening, studying a drawing she'd done of the library. "I'm rusty, still good." He set it down carefully. "You should do something with this gallery showing maybe or curating. That's a long way off. So, doesn't mean we can't plan for it." He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, settling against him. "I've been thinking about the future, about what comes after I've secured the empire. After. I can't do this forever. The violence, the constant territorial disputes, the never knowing who to trust." Dante's voice was thoughtful. "I want to build something that lasts beyond me. Something legitimate. What are you thinking? Diversification, more legal businesses, less reliance on the criminal side, real estate, shipping, maybe some tech investments." He was quiet for a moment. "And I want to create something that helps people like you, people who got dealt bad hands and need a way out." Alessia pulled back to look at him. "You're serious?" "Yeah, a foundation maybe. Scholarships for kids from abusive homes, resources for women trying to escape bad situations." His expression was intense. "Your father destroyed you for years, and watching you rebuild yourself made me realize there are thousands of people trapped in situations like that. We could help them." "We?" Her heart was pounding. "You'd be good at it, understanding what people need, seeing past the damage to who they could become." Dante's hands framed her face. "You could curate more than art. You could curate futures." Alessia felt tears burning behind her eyes. "That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. It's practical. It's both." She kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "Let's do it. Build something that matters." "Yeah." He looked almost surprised. "Yeah, but we're calling it the Moretti Foundation." At his questioning look, she explained, "My mother's maiden name. She would have loved this. Helping people who need it most. The Moretti Foundation, it is." 3 months after the warehouse meeting, Alessia sat in Dante's study, reviewing applications for their first round of scholarships. They'd quietly set up the foundation through a web of legitimate holdings, funding it with money from Dante's legal operations. 20 full-ride scholarships for students from abusive or neglectful homes who wanted to study art, literature, or social work. The applications were heartbreaking and hopeful in equal measure. Kids who'd survived worse than Alessia had, who still believed in the possibility of better futures. She read each one carefully, making notes, occasionally wiping away tears. "This one," she said, holding up a file for Dante to see. 17-year-old girl from Baltimore. Her father kicked her out when she was 15. She's been working 2 jobs and living with friends, but she's maintained a 4.0 GPA and wants to study art therapy. We need to fund her." "Then we will." Dante made a note. "How many more like that?" "All of them." Alessia gestured at the stack. "They all deserve this." "We can't fund everyone. Then we expand the foundation, get more donors, create more scholarships." Her voice was fierce. "These kids are me 5 years ago. If someone had given me a way out, given me hope, maybe I wouldn't have spent so long thinking I was worthless." Dante looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Okay, we expand." The foundation grew faster than either of them expected. Word spread through networks of social workers and teachers, and applications poured in. They hired a small staff to manage operations, set up proper vetting processes, created partnerships with universities willing to support their mission. And slowly, carefully, Dante began shifting his empire toward legitimacy. The criminal operations didn't disappear. He wasn't naive enough to think he could walk away completely, but they became smaller, more controlled, less central to his identity. The Russos tested them twice more, small probing attacks that Dante shut down with calculated brutality. After the second incident left 3 of Marco's warehouses burned to the ground, and his second-in-command in the hospital, Lorenzo called for a truce. Not peace exactly, but a mutual agreement to stop the bleeding. Luciano Moretti tried once to contact Alessia, sending a letter through channels he thought were secure. She burned it without reading past the first line. Whatever he had to say, she didn't need to hear it. A year after the wedding that was supposed to be just strategy, Alessia stood in Blackwood Manor's gardens with Dante and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire. She'd finished her degree 3 weeks earlier, was already in talks with a gallery about curating a show, and the foundation had just funded its 100th scholarship. "You know what today is?" Dante asked quietly. "Tuesday, our anniversary. 1 year since I married you in a study with armed guards outside." Alessia leaned into him, smiling. "Most romantic day of my life." "Okay. Second most romantic, huh?" The foundation launch was first. She turned to face him. "But it's the best decision I ever made. Even when I was terrified. Even when it was just strategy. It stopped being strategy the moment I saw you in your father's study." Dante's admission was quiet. "I just didn't want to admit it." "When did you know?" "Know what?" "That you loved me." He was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "When you told Isabella Russo to fuck off when you stood in that warehouse and refused to back down. When you chose this life knowing exactly how dangerous it was." His hands framed her face. "I knew before that, but I couldn't admit it. Couldn't let myself be that vulnerable. And now? Now I don't care about vulnerability. I care about you, about the life we're building." He kissed her softly. "I love you." Alessia Falcone. Completely, probably unwisely, definitely forever. Alessia felt tears spill over. "I love you too, even though you're a criminal and you still scare me sometimes, and you drink too much whiskey when you're stressed." Fair criticisms. "But you see me, you've always seen me, and you help me see myself." She wrapped her arms around him. "That's everything." They stood like that as the sun finished setting, wrapped in each other. The forest around Blackwood Manor settling into twilight quiet. Somewhere in the house, Sophia was probably preparing dinner. Rocco was coordinating security rotations. The foundation staff was reviewing applications for the next round of scholarships. Life continued, complicated and dangerous and absolutely real, and Alessia had never been happier. 2 years later, she sat in a rocking chair in the nursery they'd set up in the East Wing, their daughter sleeping against her shoulder. Isabella was 3 months old, named for the woman who'd tried to convince Alessia to leave, and inadvertently shown her how strong she'd become. The irony hadn't been lost on anyone. Dante appeared in the doorway, fresh from a meeting with his lawyers about transitioning another chunk of operations to legitimate businesses. He'd kept his word about building something that lasted. The criminal empire still existed, but it was shrinking, controlled, no longer the center of his identity. "She asleep?" he whispered. Finally, Alessia smiled as Dante crossed to them, looking at their daughter with an expression of wonder that still surprised her sometimes. "Your meeting go okay?" "Better than expected. If this deal goes through, we'll have divested from 70% of the illegal operations." He settled on the arm of the rocker. "Your father would have called that weakness. My father was wrong about everything that mattered." "Yeah, he was." Dante touched Isabella's tiny hand, his finger engulfed by her grip. "She's going to grow up different than we did. Safe, loved, free to choose her own path. Thanks to you. Thanks to us." He looked at Alessia. "You taught me that power isn't just about control and fear. It's about creating space for people to become who they're meant to be. That's very profound for a former crime lord, current crime lord. I've still got 30% of operations left." His smile was wry, "but I'm working on it." Alessia leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling their daughter's warm weight, Dante's steady presence, the safety of Blackwood Manor around them. "We did good. We did." He kissed her temple. "Though I still can't believe you named our daughter after someone who tried to convince you to leave me. It's symbolic, turning something threatening into something precious." Alessia grinned. "Plus, it pisses off the Russos every time they hear it. There's my wife. Your wife who used to be invisible and now runs a foundation helping hundreds of people rebuild their lives." She stood carefully, transferring Isabella to her crib. "Your wife who turned a strategic marriage into actual love. Your wife who proved that being dealt a bad hand doesn't mean you can't win the game. My wife who's gotten way too confident," Dante teased, pulling her close once they'd left the nursery. "You made me confident. You and Rocco and Sophia and everyone who treated me like I mattered." Alessia held his gaze. "I was broken when you met me, and you didn't fix me. You gave me the tools to fix myself. You did the work. We did the work." She kissed him together like everything else. That night, after Isabella had been fed and settled after the household had gone quiet, Alessia sat at her desk and pulled out the sketchbook she'd been keeping since those early days at Blackwood Manor. Page after page of charcoal drawings, documenting her transformation, frightened girl in corners, woman learning to shoot, wife standing beside her husband in warehouses full of enemies, mother holding her daughter for the first time. The final pages were blank, waiting for whatever came next. Alessia picked up her charcoal, considering, then began to sketch. Not fear this time, not violence or survival or strategic marriages, just a simple image of a family in a garden, safe and whole and free. The girl her father had sold would never have imagined this future. But the woman she'd become had fought for it, chosen it, built it piece by piece from destruction and impossible circumstances. And standing at the window watching Dante walk the grounds with their daughter, Alessia understood that the greatest revenge against everyone who tried to break her wasn't violence or wealth or even success. It was joy. Pure, uncomplicated, hard-won joy. She'd started as nothing, invisible, discarded, a debt to be paid. She'd survived being traded like property, married a man who terrified her, walked into rooms full of enemies, and held her ground. She'd rebuilt herself from the wreckage of her father's cruelty and Dante's dangerous world. And she'd become Alessia Falcone, wife, mother, curator of futures for people who needed hope, woman who turned punishment into liberation and destruction into something fierce and alive and absolutely unbreakable. The story that began with her father's signature on a contract ended with her signature on scholarship letters, foundation documents, custody papers that made Isabella theirs forever, ended with her choosing every single day the life she'd built and the man she'd built it with. Outside, Dante looked up at her window and smiled. Alessia smiled back, pressed her hand to the glass, and felt the absolute certainty of someone who'd finally found where they belonged. She was home, she was safe, she was seen.